Hilchos Ishus Perek Sheni, the laws of marriage, chapter 2. Yesterday we learned some terminologies that are going to be coming up again and again throughout this book and the next relating to Jewish marriage. We learned about the concept of kiddushin, the fact that before you marry a woman, you have to do an act of acquisition that makes her exclusively yours. And we also learned about different categories of forbidden relationships. Relationships forbidden by the Torah, the Isur Karet, you get excision if you violate them. Isurei Lav, violations of a negative commandment. Isurei Aseh, violations of a positive commandment. And a Shniya, which is a rabbinic forbidden relationship. Today, the Rambam is going to also spend the whole time on defining terms. But these are going to be terms not so much related to marriage, but related to human beings. Defining different stages in male and female growth. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph, Habas, a girl, miyoim leidasa ad shetiya b'shtem-esrei shana gemuros, from the day that she's born until she is 12 complete years old. And the Rambam will say later that years means Jewish calendar years. So it's not 12 months or 12 solar years, 12 Jewish calendar years, including leap years, including regular years. From 0 till 12, hi hanikras ketana v'nikras tinoikes. She's called ketana, small, and she's called tinoket, which also is like a term for young girl. So you can see over here, Raka. From age 0 all the way until age 12, she's in the category of a ketana. Even if she produces multiple pubic hairs during this time, einam ella kishuma. They're only considered like a mole, not natural physical maturity. It's like an aberration, something unnatural, and it doesn't count towards defining her maturity. But if she produces 2 hairs in the places in the body down below which are known for producing hair, the pubic area, anytime after 12 years old and 1 day, nikras nara. Now she is called a young girl. So typically it happens at about 12 years old when she produces what's the first shtei sa'arot, that's called 2 pubic hairs, and then she becomes called a na'ara, a young girl. She's also called a gedola, apparently at this point, an adult. Producing these 2 hairs during this time of age is called the lower sign, siman hatachton. We're going to see later there's siman hatachton and siman ha'elyon. Lower signs of physical maturity, upper signs of physical maturity. This is called the lower sign. From the moment she produces the lower sign of physical maturity, tikare nara ad shisha chadashim gemurim. She is in the state of being a nara, a young girl, for exactly 6 months. Umitchilas yoim tashlum hashisha chadashim v'mala tikare beigeres. The moment the 6 days are up, and afterwards, 6 months are up, and afterwards she's called bogeret. Bogeret, today's Hebrew, means mature. But it's the term for a woman who has not only produced physical maturity, but been in that state for 6 months. That's always how it works. Between the stage of na'arut, being a young girl, and bagrut, being a bogeret, there's always 6 months. So typically it happens at 12 years old. And therefore, from 12 to 12 and a half, she's called a na'ara. After 12 and a half, she's called a bogeret. But the truth is, let's say she has a little bit of delayed puberty. So she produces these signs at age 13. So at age 13, the na'arut will begin. And 13 and a half is when she becomes a bogeret. The 12-year-old line is only the minimum age. That's when it could possibly start. But any time afterwards, as soon as she produces the hairs, she becomes a na'ara, and then 6 months later, she's a bogeret. Halacha Gimel, higia l'shtem-esrei shana v'yem echad v'lo hivia shtei sa'aros. What happens if she reaches 12 years old in 1 day, and there are no pubic hairs? Puberty hasn't started. Afal pisha niru ba simanei ailonis. Even though you begin to see the signs of a barren woman, ailonit is a term that's going to come up also again and again in these laws. It means a woman who cannot physically have children because her body didn't physically develop. So even if you see signs of a barren woman, adayin ketanahi ad esrim shana, we're still going to consider her to be a young child until 20 years of age. So you see on this map, you have 0. At 12 years old, we're at a question if she's an na'ara, because she didn't yet produce any physical signs. So we wait until 20 years old. Even if at this point you begin to see signs of a barren woman, doesn't matter. You wait it out. These 8 years, maybe she'll produce regular signs of puberty. Ucheshatavi shtei saras, at any time between 12 and 20 years old, if she does produce those 2 pubic hairs, afilu bishnas esrim, even in her 20th year, tia nara shisha chadashim va'achar kach tikari begeres. She will first go through the stage of na'ara, young girl, for 6 months, and then she'll be called a bogeret, an adult girl. Halacha dalid, hoisa bas esrim shana pachish leishim yoim. What if she's just 30 days? Under becoming 20 years old, 19 days, and 19 years and 11 months old, the loyhevia shtei saires, and she had not yet produced any signs of puberty below, the niruba kol simani ailenis, if all of the signs that define a barren woman, which we'll soon see what they are, if she has all of them, harehi ailenis. At this point, 20 years old, she can be considered to be a barren woman. The imloy niruba kol simani ailenis, but if she's not here nor there, she hasn't produced any pubic hair, but you don't see all of the signs of the barren woman on her. Adayin ketanahi, she's still considered a young child, for halachic terminology. Ad shetavi shtei saires, till she either produces 2 pubic hairs, oy ad shetia bas chamesh or shleishim shana v'yem echad, or she turns 35 years old. Once you hit 35, halacha hey higi al azman hazeh, v'loy hevia shtei saires, if she reaches age 35 and hasn't produced anything down below, harezu nikras ailenis, she is called at this point a barren woman. Afal pisha loy niraba siman misimani ailenis. Even if no signs of the barren woman are apparent, she's still considered to be a barren woman at this stage. So it comes out that you learn from the above facts the following: a woman who is actually barren never goes through the stage called na'ara. She never becomes the young girl for 6 months. From the age of smallness, she goes out to the age of full maturity. And so you see it over here on this map. 0 till 12, she's a ketana. At this point, there's no pubic hair, so we're in question. Is she an na'ara? We don't know. We wait till she's 20. At 20 years old is the first time we can call her an ailonit. If we see all the signs of a barren woman, at 20 she'll be called a barren woman. If there's no signs of the barren woman either, then we keep on waiting till 35. If here she produces 2 pubic hairs, we go back to this stage, na'ara. She becomes na'ara for 6 months and then becomes a regular bogeret. But if nothing happens till 35, at 35 it's an automatic transformation. She becomes called an ailonit, a barren woman, as well as a bogeret, as well as a fully mature woman, even though she's not in any way physically mature. Halacha vav ve'elu hein simane ailenis. What indeed are the signs of a barren woman? First of all, kol she'ein lo dadin, if she has no breasts, umiskasha b'shas tashmish, and she stiffens during intimacy. Ve'ein lo shipule me'ayim kanashim, her lower abdomen doesn't resemble that of a woman. Ve'koila ove ve'eina nikeres bein ish leisha, she has a deeper voice, and you can't tell it, you can't recognize it apart between a man and a woman. These are all signs of a woman who is not developed physically as a woman. And therefore, if she has all of them at age 20, or even some of them or none of them, but she reaches age 35 with no signs of physical maturity, she's called an ailonit. The hanara v'habageres v'ha'ailonis kol achas mishlashta nikras gedoyla. At any stage, once you hit this stage already of na'ara, and certainly later, if you're a bogeret or an ailonit, in all 3 cases you're called a gedola, an adult woman. Adult woman means a woman who has either transferred into adulthood by producing pubic signs, or by dint of reaching 35 and becoming known as a barren woman. Halacha zayin v'yesh babas simonin milamayla v'hena nikrayin simon ha'elyon. Besides for pubic hairs down below, which is called the lower sign of physical maturity, there's also physical signs on the upper half of a woman's body, which are called the upper signs of physical maturity. The eluhain, and they are the following. And the Rambam gives a number of them. They don't all have to contribute. Either one of them suffices to be called siman ha'elyon. And they are, and you can see it over here, again, just to remind yourself, siman ha'tachton, siman ha'elyon. Mishatachazir yodeha la'achayra v'ye'ase kemet b'mkoim hadadin. Number 1 is if a woman stretches her hand backward, a crease will form in the place of her breast. That means she's physically maturing. Umishayashchir reish hadad. Once the color of the tip of the breast becomes darker. Umishayitin adam yodei al oiketz hadad v'hu shekeya v'sheyalachzer. If a person were to put his finger and apply pressure to the edge of the breast, it would sink in and delay in returning. That's how you know that the skin is becoming more physically developed. If creases form at the end of a breast and the nipple begins to take shape, a small ball. My teachers explained this sign to mean so long as the crease forms, even if the nipple fully doesn't form, it's already a physical sign. Once the breasts protrude, it's also a sign. Or once they become, according to some translations here, they say it means erect. But others say it means when they become big enough that they shake back and forth when she walks. And when, they call this in English the mons pubis, or the mound of Venus, becomes formed. It's an area of flesh just above the woman's genitals that becomes a little bit protruded. Once this flesh, this mound of Venus, becomes softer and isn't so hard, that's also called siman ha'alyon. All of these are above the pubic area, and therefore they're called the higher sign of physical maturity. If any of these come in, says the Rambam, halacha ches, kol elu hasimanin shmeina, these are all 8 signs in total. Nira babas, simon echad, nikol elu, oikulan, if any one of these, or all of them, become apparent in a young girl, the less than 12 years old, again, we ignore it. She's still considered to be a ketana. For a woman, until 12, we ignore all signs. Whatever happens in the first 12 years of her life doesn't count. If a woman becomes 12 years old and one day and she has the lower sign, the pubic signs, we don't even have to care about the upper signs. As long as she's producing hair down below, that's already enough of a sign. The only time these upper signs matter is if a woman reaches 12 years old and she has no lower signs, but she does have an upper sign. At this point, she becomes in doubt whether she's still a young girl, a ketana, or she's already become a na'ara, the next stage. And we treat it with stringency. In other words, wherever it'll be stricter to consider her to be a child, we consider her to be a child. Wherever it'll be stricter to consider her to be a young girl, we're going to consider her to be a young girl. If the woman gets all of the upper signs, all 8 signs we just enumerated, if she has them all, without any pubic hair, she becomes a halachic adult because she has all the upper signs. It's impossible physically, if a woman develops her breasts up to that stage, certainly there's also been pubic hair, it just probably fell off and we didn't notice it. If a woman gives birth after 12 years old, even though her body showed no physical signs of maturity, not below and not above, the fact that she gave birth already makes her into an adult. Banim harehim kisimanim, as the Talmud says, children is considered like signs of physical maturity. And so that covers all the stages of growth as related to a girl. And now we transfer to a boy. It says that Rambam Malacha Yud Haben, a boy. Misha Yivaled Ad Sheyeh Ben 13 Shana. From the day he's born till he becomes 13 years old, Nikra Katan v'Nikra Tinek. It's called a Katan, a young child, and Tinek, like a baby boy. Like the girl. Even if he produces multiple pubic hairs during this time, the first 13 years, it's not considered to be a sign of maturity, it's simply considered to be hair growing from a mole. But if he produces 2 hairs down below in the places that are known to produce hair, pubic area, from 13 years and up, Nikra Gadol v'Nikra Ish, at this point he's called an adult and he's called a man. Halacha Yud Aleph. Now we're going to see the parallel, kind of like by a woman, where she can become barren, also by a man, is what's called a saris, an impotent man. That also gets defined by ages 20 and 35. It says that if a boy reaches 13 years old and has not produced 2 pubic hairs, even though at the same time there are signs that it's apparent that he's going to be impotent, he's still considered to be a young child. We don't declare him to be impotent till we get to 20 years old. 30 days under 20 years old. And now we check him again. If a boy reaches this age of 20 and he has neither 2 pubic hairs or 2 hairs in the beard area, 2 facial hairs, if at this point any one of the signs of an impotent man is apparent on his body, he is considered at this point 20 years old to be impotent, and with that he transfers to adulthood for every matter. The Rambam will soon tell us what the signs of an impotent man are. But if at 20 years old, he's neither here nor there, he has no facial hair, no pubic hair, but also no signs of an impotent man, Adayin katanhu, so at age 20, he's still considered to be in the halacha category of a katan, of a child, until either he produces 2 pubic hairs in the proper place, or till, like the woman, he turns 35. Because at 35, if he reaches this time without producing pubic hairs, or facial hairs, or nothing, and he's 35 years old, he becomes considered an impotent man according to halacha, even if no signs of impotency are apparent on his body. What if he reaches 20 years old, under 30, with no pubic hair, but he does have facial hair, and he has 2 hairs where the beard would grow? So kind of like the woman, in which she has no lower signs, but she has an upper sign. Even if we do see a sign of being impotent, because he has facial hair, he's not considered yet to be an actual impotent man. The beard hairs keep him in the stage of katnut, till we see either all the signs of an impotent man, or he becomes 35 years old in a day, at which point we disregard everything and that's it. If you don't have pubic hair at 35, you're out, you're a saris. So on the boy's chart, we can see how at 0, he's a katan. At 13 is when the first time he can become a gadol. Until 20, we're still looking out for him to become a gadol. At age 20, if all the signs of an impotent man are there, he becomes a saris. If not, we keep on waiting till 35, and at 35, whatever happens, he is unfortunately a saris, an impotent man. Yud Gimel ve'elu hein simani saris. What are the signs of an impotent man? Number 1, kol she'en le'zakon. If either he has no beard, usa'arei lakoi, his hair grows inadequately, it's very thin, not enough. Ubesarei machlik, his flesh is smooth, he has no hair growing as men have all over their body. Ve'ein mei meraglav malim resicha. When he urinates, there's no vapor. Ukeshamatil mayim eina esekipa. Neither when he urinates does it flow in an arc. The stream of the urine doesn't go in an arc. B'shichva zarei deha, his semen is off color. Ve'ein mei meraglav machmitzin, his urine does not ferment. In times of old, they used to use urine to ferment for 40 days as a cleaning agent. We saw this before in the Rambam. So this was a common test. If urine didn't ferment, it was a sign of impotency. Yeah. If he washes in the winter, his flesh doesn't produce steam. His voice is high-pitched, without being able to tell the difference between a man and a woman. Yeah, a saris, it's a good question if he can count for a minyan. He's considered a regular Jew for all matters. Just impotent. So, in terms of marriage, you'd look out for him. Yudalid v'saris zeh hu hanikra sris chama b'chol makom. This type of impotent man, naturally impotent, in other words, nothing happened to make him impotent, he's called sris chama. You can see over here on the top, sris chama means naturally impotent. Chama, according to some commentaries, means a fever, which means that we say that when he was a baby, he caught some kind of a fever which made him impotent. Others say chama means the sun. From the day he's seen the sun, he was already impotent. The point is, you're naturally impotent. Aval haben, but if there's a boy who was unfortunately castrated, shachaschu, nitku, miachu, gidavei beitzav, they cut off, or they smashed, or they crushed his organ or his testicles, like some idol-worshipping Gentiles were wont to do. Hu hanikra sris adam. That's called impotent by human intervention. Somebody else made him impotent.
So they did it for opera?
Yeah, they did it for different reasons. Such a person, because someone's intervened in his bodily growth, so we don't have to wait for anything. The moment he becomes 13 years old, he's already called an adult. Somebody who's been castrated is not going to produce signs of physical maturity. They've interrupted his natural organic development. And therefore, at 13, he's already called an adult. Tesvav ben if a 13-year-old boy did not produce any lower signs, any pubic hair, and all the upper signs of physical maturity manifests. The commentaries here explain that means he grows hair in his beard, in his underarms, his voice changes, his hair is growing properly, his flesh is not smooth. It's becoming, in other words, he's going through puberty in every other way. Harei safek ben gadol lekatan. Like the woman who has no lower signs but has an upper sign, this boy is also considered to be in doubt whether he's an adult or a child. V'im lo nivdak milamata, if nobody checked him down below, kevan shenira by simane bagros milamaylo, once we observe signs of adulthood above, harei bechezkas gadol, we can assume that he is an adult, and we don't have to go further than that. But if we happen to know that there are no lower signs and there are only upper signs, then he's in doubt between gadol and katan. Tezayin, we keep on saying in this chapter, shtei sairis, 2 hairs, 2 pubic hairs. How big do these hairs have to be? Shtei sairis ha'amuris baben uvabas b'chol makan. Whenever we use the terminology of 2 hairs, both by a boy or by a girl, shi'uran k'dei lachif reishan le'ikran. Their size is that they're big enough where you can, by hand, bend them backwards. When your hair is pretty short, it's pretty hard to bend it over. But if you can bend the top to the root, the hair is big enough. The truth is, once they begin to grow, and they're big enough to be cut by a scissor, but not yet big enough to be bent over from top to bottom, we have to already begin treating this like an adult, and for all ways of stringency, we treat him like an adult. So for example, when it comes to, let's say, fasting, fast on a fast day, if his hairs are big enough that they can be cut off by a scissor, he's already considered to be an adult and has to begin fasting. Right. But for other laws, if we be more stringent to consider him to be a child, we consider him to be a child. Lefichach, therefore, bebenu v'bas nachshev oisam gedolim lahachmir. If a boy or a girl produces such hair, big enough to be cut by a scissor, but not big enough to be bent over, we're going to consider them to be adults when it comes to being stringent. Hoyel v'tzamchu kedei lihinatol b'fi azuk, since they've grown big enough to be cut by a scissor. But we're also going to classify them as young children in a stringent way, since they aren't big enough yet to be bent over from top to the root. These 2 hairs must grow in the pubic area. The entire area is appropriate for these hairs to grow. Bein lemaila, bein lemata, whether above the genitals, below the genitals, bein al evrei azera atzman, or on the organs themselves. The 2 hairs need to be adjacent to one another. And they have to each have their own pore. When you pull out your hairs, you can see that each one has a pore on its own. Even if the 2 hairs are growing out of one pore, that's also a sign. But there has to be a pore. If you examine the area and you find 2 pores, but there is no hair, the pores themselves are considered to be a sign of physical maturity. According to halacha, there is a presumption that there is no such thing as a pore without hair having grown. And we say that there were hairs and they fell out. If you have a girl who produces 2 pubic hairs during the first 12 years of her life, or a boy who does so during the first 13 years of his life, so we said before, we've already explained that they're both considered to be nothing growing out of a mole. But what if they stay? Even if those 2 hairs stay in their place, after the boy or girl turned 13 or 12, respectively, since they grew earlier, we don't count them. There has to be new hairs that grow after 13 or after 12. Those are the ones that are going to make them into adults. When do we say that hair left over isn't considered to be a sign? If they were already checked during the first 12, 13 years and it already became known that they have this mole growing hair. But if the boy or girl were never checked till after 13 or 12, and you find 2 hairs there, they are considered, they are presumed to be signs of physical maturity. We don't say, maybe they grew earlier and we'll make them, classified as a wrong type of physical sign. No, if you only checked for the first time after 13 or 12, you consider it a sign of puberty. When we check a girl to ascertain her physical status, whether during the time, the 12th year, whether before the time, during the first 11 years, or after the time, whenever we're checking a girl, we use women who are fitting women and are trustworthy. They were known to have this job. Bodeket, they were called, the searchers, the checkers. Even it could be one woman. Typically for testimony we need 2. But for this case, we can have just one woman check, and she's believed. And we listen to her whether the girl has produced signs of physical maturity or not. Chaf Aleph, general rule. I said this before in the beginning of the chapter. Kol hashanim ha'amures bebenu bebas. Anytime you have the word years mentioned by a boy or a girl, ube'erchin, or by the laws of endowments, we're going to learn about this in the 6th book of the Rambam, special law of erchin. If someone says, I want to give your value to the temple, how much is your value? So in Torah it says, it's not an actual value, it's Torah's value. Between 0 and this age, you're worth this amount of shekels. The next age, you're this amount. So it's called erchin. So when we say those terms, years, or in every place in halacha, what do we mean by years? It's not lunar years, 12 months. It's not solar years, 365 days. It's Jewish calendar years. Regular years and leap years as they are decided by the court, as we've explained in the laws of the calendar. It's these types of years that we use to count for all matters of religion. Even though one year will be 12 months, the next year will be 13 months, it's a Jewish calendar year. So when does a boy turn 12 or turn 13? After 13 Jewish calendar years from the day he was born. This is pre-birth certificate days. People didn't keep track of when they were born exactly. So who can we rely on to know if a kid is 12 years old, 13 years old, 20 years old, 35? Who's going to tell us if they reach that age? So when it comes to counting years, we cannot rely on testimony of women, or on relatives. It's like regular testimony. We need 2 kosher men to testify that they know how old this person is. If a father says, my son is 9 years old. At 9 years old, many laws begin to apply to a child. So it's important to know when he's 9. Or my daughter is 3 years old. Ne'eman lekarban. His word is accepted with regards to a sacrifice. We're going to see later in the Rambam, there's a special law that if somebody has relations with a woman or a man that's forbidden, and they were unaware that it's forbidden, of the prohibition, then as long as the boy is 9 years old or the girl is 3 years old, they're both liable to bring a sacrifice. Korban chatat. So the Rambam says over here, a father can establish his son or his daughter's age with regard to bringing a sacrifice for unaware marital relations. But his word is not accepted with regards to giving them malkut, lashes, or punishments, because he's a relative. We don't accept the age factor from the father. If a father says, my son is 13 years old, my daughter is 12 years old, we believe him with regards to the laws of vows. As soon as an adult hits that age, they become an adult for vows. We believe him for the laws of endowments, giving the value to the temple. Or for consecration of property, or for hekdesh, property given to the temple, that they can do these things. They're old enough to do these things. But again, not with regards to lashes or to punishments, we don't believe the father that these kids are that old, and we have to have outside testimony from 2 men that can ascertain her age, or his age. Chav Daled, another term before we leave the chapter. Misha yeshle ever zachrus ve'ever nakvos. If somebody is born with 2 reproductive organs, both male and female genitalia, hu hanikra androgynos. He's called in Hebrew androgynos. Hermaphrodite, we call him in English. V'hu safek im zachar safek im nekeva. According to halacha, he's in doubt whether he's a man or a woman. Ve'ein lo siman sheyivada bay imu zachar vada im nekeva vada is la'ilam. There is no way to ascertain ever to know if he's a full male or a full female. But if somebody has no organ in the area of the genitals, not male, not female, it's just stuffed, it's blocked, that's called in halacha a tumtum. The gam hu safek, he's also in doubt, but in a different way, because he's a doubt that could be resolved. There was a surgery you can do to open up the skin. If the tumtum's blocked skin is ripped open and he's found to be a male, he's a full-on male. If he's found to be a female, he's a female. She's a female. And either the blocked skin person or the hermaphrodite, once they turn 12, we have to assume that they're females. They become adults at age 12. And these are the people about which we speak in every area in halacha. Many halachot deal with tumtum and androgynous. We actually already had them in the laws of shofar. Can they blow shofar for somebody else? That was when we came across for the first time. But they're going to come up in many other contexts. And so it's important to know that in both cases they're considered to be in doubt, but different kinds of doubt. The tumtum, we could figure him out. Androgynous is an essential doubt. We can never figure him out. Chavav. Another term, cheresh v'chereshes, ha'amurim b'chol makom. Whenever we say the word cheresh for a man or chereshet for a woman, so in modern Hebrew it means deaf. But the truth is in halacha, hein ha'ilmim she'ein shoymin v'loy medabrim. It's a deaf mute. They're the blocked ones who don't hear or speak. Aval misha medaber v'ein shemea shemea v'ein medaber. But if you can speak without hearing, or you hear and you don't speak, harehu kechal adam. For halacha purposes, you're like every other regular person. The ish v'isha shehin shleimin b'daitan, a man or a woman who are complete, stable in their mental health. The einon loy chershim v'loy shaitim, they aren't deaf mutes and they aren't mentally disturbed. Nikrayin pikeach upikachas. So in halacha, a normal person is called pikeach or pikachat. So it's important to know those terms as well because they're going to come up again a lot in these coming books. It says the Rambam in summary, halacha chav zayin. Nimtzu kol ha-shemois shebe'arnu inyanam b'shnei prakim elu esrim shemois. All the terminologies that we've explained their concepts in these two chapters are 20 terms in total. Ve'elu hein, they are the following. Kiddushin. That means the acquisition that you make to a woman before you marry her. The Rambam doesn't mention nisuin, marriage, because that's the whole topic here. These 20 terms are 20 specific terms within marriage. But marriage is the overarching concept. So we have kiddushin, that's the acquisition. Erva means a woman forbidden to you on penalty of excision. Shniya, that's a rabbinic, a prohibited woman. Isurei lavim, relationships forbidden by a negative commandment. Isurei aseh, relations forbidden by a positive commandment. Ketana, that's a woman in the first 12 years of life or till she produces pubic hair. Nara, a girl once she produces pubic hair for 6 months. Bogeret, that's an adult woman after those 6 months pass. Islandness is a barren woman. Gedoyla is an adult woman that covers all those categories. Na'ara, bogeret, islandit. Simon ha'tachton, lower sign of physical maturity. Simon ha'elyon, upper sign of physical maturity. Katan, a young boy till 13. Stris chama, naturally impotent. Stris adam, human intervention impotent. Gadol, an adult boy, adult man. Androgynous, hermaphrodite. Tumtum, blocked person. Chershim, deaf mute. Pikchim, normal person. Says the Rambam, Sim kol hashemois ha'elu lu'umas chatamid. Place all these terms in front of you constantly. Va'al yoluzu me'einecha kol inyanehem. And all their meanings should never move from your eyes. Kedei shalei niyeh tzrichim levayer kol shem mehen. So we won't have to re-explain every term, b'chol makom shenazkir osai, every place that we're going to mention them. This way I give you 20 terms in the beginning, you have them all, and now when we use them constantly throughout the next 2 books, we're going to always know what they mean.